Welcome to this course on building your ethical intelligence. My name is Blair Cook, and in the previous course, we raised your awareness of ethically charged situations. And in today's course, we're going to focus on approaches to dealing with such situations. In this first lesson, we're going to begin by doing a fun little quiz just to get you practice doing some decision making. Are you ready to go? All right. All you'll need is a little scratch paper to keep track of your answers to the following 5 questions. Question number 1. You notice that your friend Margaret has posted a new picture of herself on Facebook in which she is smoking a joint with one hand while holding a bottle of rum with the other. What would you do? Call her to say that you don't think the photo is a good idea? B, just ignore it, it's her life? C, like the photo? Or D, make a copy of the photo just in case you need leverage someday? Question number 2. You're having a drink at a pub and overhear 2 colleagues talking openly about a customer situation which is highly sensitive. They are mentioning the customer by name as well as the specifics of the situation. What would you do? A, talk to them and raise your concern about confidentiality. B, ignore it, it's none of your business. C, return to the office and tell your supervisor. Or D, use your cell phone to record the situation and post the clip on YouTube. Question number 3. You take your 10-year-old son to a restaurant that is advertising that kids under 10 eat free. The restaurant's management thus considers your son to be an adult. What would you do? A, inform the server that your son is under the age of 10. B, ask for 2 adult menus. C, tell your son to say he's 9 years old if he's asked. Or D, ask your son what he wants to do and then do that. Question number 4. One of your employees is always late, takes long breaks, and leaves early. And a few months ago, you fired someone else for doing the same thing. This employee, however, is the son of a close personal friend. You've talked with him in the past, but the problems continue. What would you do? A, fire him and know you may be jeopardizing your friendship. B, ignore it because your friendship is more important. C, talk to him again and give a formal warning. Or D, ask your friend, his parent, to talk with him. Question number 5. You wake up on a work day with the flu, but are expecting a really important announcement to happen that day. What would you do? A, stay home and rest and find out about it tomorrow. B, stay at home and work. You can call someone later to find out what was announced. C, go to work but avoid close contact with other people. Or D, go to work but only engage with people you don't like. Okay, we're going to look at the potential responses to this quiz in the lesson to come. However, let's just reflect upon the quiz itself. First of all, I'm going to ask you a question. Whether or not you recognized or perhaps even believe that each of these 5 situations were indeed ethical scenarios. Most people don't even recognize that ethics is embedded in everyday situations like these. Secondly, how did you make your decisions in each of these scenarios? Was it an intuitive guess? Was it based on your past behavior? Was it based on how you felt at the moment? Did you consider who may benefit? Or did you consider the risk of being caught? Most people make these decisions in an instant. They don't stop and necessarily think about the range of implications or possible outcomes. We explored these means and ends rationalizations in our previous course and recognized that there is a lot of different rationalizations that one can use to justify their actions. So, as we begin looking at the approaches to ethical situations in this course, I want you to think about and recognize that first and foremost, ethical decisions are made every day, and they're all around us. And that secondly, that these decisions can often be much more involved than that intuitive first hunch that the right side of your brain wants to make. And instead to slow down and use the left side and the ethical intelligence of logic in evaluating each of these situations. So that's where we're going to pick up in our next lesson. We'll see you then. As financial professionals, and many of us professional accountants, somewhere along the way you came across, when you learned accounting, the 2 different approaches to setting generally accepted accounting principles. The US, adopted by the FASB, uses a rules-driven approach. It's prescriptive in nature and designed to limit the amount of professional judgment and discretion that professional accountants have in classifying, measuring, and recording transactions. On the other hand, the ISAB, the international standard setting body, they used an approach that was intended to be principles driven. The standards they develop allow for more professional judgment and latitude, but require the practitioner to consider the principle of the standard over the specific rules. Building your ethical intelligence can be developed the same way, using either a principles-based approach that you will learn more about in this lesson, or a prescriptive approach which you will learn more about in the lesson that follows. Dr. Bruce Weinstein wrote a book entitled Ethical Intelligence, which attempts to develop a principles-based framework for guiding ethical decision-making. Ethical intelligence is guided by 5 principles. The principles themselves are not earth-shattering. On the surface, you might even consider them to be rather obvious. However, through time, they have been proven to be tremendously difficult to live by. The 5 principles he identified were, first of all, do no harm. Secondly, to make things better. Third, to respect others. Fourth, to be fair. And fifth, to be loving. Let's explore each of these principles a little bit further. First of all, we have do no harm. Some of you may recognize this principle as one of the foundations underpinning the medical profession. When you see a doctor, you should have an expectation that they will not harm you or make matters worse. But the principle is equally valid across all professionals, including the finance profession. There is this unwritten expectation of our fellow human beings that they will not inflict physical, emotional, and in a financial context, any monetary harm on you, and in return, you will not do likewise to them. One of the easiest ways to avoid doing harm is to simply do nothing. You might think of this as a principle of restraint. Do nothing. So, for example, don't get yourself involved in conflicts of interest. Don't pursue tactics that potentially could harm others, such as misleading advertising or fraudulent financial reporting. Simply don't do it. It seems straightforward enough. However, there are a few nuances to this principle that make it a little trickier to apply in practice. Consider the following scenario. You're walking by some railroad tracks and see an oncoming train. There are 2 workers ahead of the train working on the tracks that are apparently oblivious to the oncoming train. You notice a switch nearby which could divert the train safely to another line. And even though you don't work for the railway, do you pull the switch? Assuming that it's as easy as flipping a light switch. In this case, your do-nothing approach doesn't feel so easy, does it? Most of us with some sort of moral conscience and compassion for others are going to pull the switch and save those lives. This is the proverbial Good Samaritan. However, it illustrates in doing no harm, we should also attempt to prevent harm as well. What other sorts of situations in your work and personal lives might you attempt to prevent harm? Well, for example, we don't let others drink and drive. It requires us to intervene. We may be someone who comes to someone else's rescue when they're being mugged or attacked. And in the workplace, standing up and voicing our objections to questionable activities or harassment or blowing the whistle when we see something that is wrong are all examples of preventing harm. Let's push this scenario to another ethical level. Going back to that oncoming train, it's the same circumstance, only this time there happens to be 1 worker on the diversion line and 2 workers in front of the train on its current track. What do you do? In other words, do you stand by and watch 2 workers die or flip the switch and instead kill 1 worker? This is a much more difficult because we are actively involved in perhaps the death of a worker, and all sorts of ethical issues arise here. How will the law and society judge us? Will we be a hero or will we be perceived as a murderer? Logically, we should recognize that by pulling the switch, it is probably the right thing to do because in doing so, we are minimizing unavoidable harm, which is also an element of this do no harm principle. That being said, few of us would pull the switch in situation 2. And the reason is because there's a difference. There's a difference in our moral mind between situation 1 and situation 2. Your moral mind ascribes more guilt according to intentional acts, particularly those that are foreshadowing harm. Your moral mind is biased when it judges the actions viewed as intentional and does so more harshly than it might the omission of action. So none of us is likely to encounter a strange situation in the workplace, but what sort of realistic situations might you expect where this idea of minimizing unavoidable harm becomes a reality? Can you think of any examples? How about situations where you must lay off workers for the company to survive? Or perhaps where you must offer a discount to one customer and not others to retain a customer? It doesn't make you feel much better, but instinctively you know it's the right thing to do in the circumstance.